Hey guys, welcome back. So let's move right on. Now, since we've already done our user interface for the users, and we've also created the layout for the custom list, we can now move on to actually fetching the data. Now, the very first thing we need is actually another library that I'd like us to import. So let's go over to our browser, and in another tab type Firebase UI, and this first entry should be the one. So what we're essentially trying to do in this users activity is going to this database, get all of these users and display their information. Now, writing the code for this is pretty straightforward and actually not that difficult. It's something that we could do quite easily. The reason that I want us to use a library for this is because this particular library was optimized for dealing with a real-time database. That's the key thing with Firebase database. It's real-time, and code such as this that we're about to use helps us handle real-time data. Okay, so let's go to the installation. Now, the way this particular library works is you have to match it to the other Firebase components that you're using. So for example, let's go to ours. We're using 11.0.4, yeah, for all our components: storage, database, and authentication. Now, I happen to know that the correct one that we should use is, let me find it, this one. I'm going to copy that. It's under installation, and I'm going to paste it anywhere here. Paste that. So as I was saying, I happen to know that the correct version that we should be using is 2.3.0. But see, this is a rather old one. Right now they are already on 4.1.0. So just make sure you follow the steps. There are steps for showing you exactly which one to take included in the page. If you happen to use a different version of Firebase than I do, make sure you follow the steps to take the correct Firebase UI dependency. Okay, that's enough of that. Let's go back to Android Studio, and I'm going to sync this. Okay, that's done. One thing I will mention though before I continue, just let me go back to the browser for a moment, is that this library, it's actually a few libraries, and they are for all the components. So there's the one for the database, there's the one for storage, and there's one for Firestore, and there's one for storage as well as authentication. We only need the one for the database. That's why I only took the implementation that said database. Just another thing to note. And there it is, Firebase UI database. Okay, right, so let's move on. Okay, the next thing we need, since we're getting data about a user, we need a class that will hold that data. We need a model. So I'm going to right click here, new Java class, and we'll call it user. Singular user, by the way. If we called it users, for one, that would clash with this activity, and also each of these models will hold just a single person's details, so it makes sense to call it user. And within the class we'll have a string for the name, the username, that is, the status, and the image. That's all we need for now. We can change it later. Make sure the variable names match up exactly with the names in your database, the field names in your database: username, status, image, exactly like that. All right, now the next thing we need is a constructor. So hit Alt and insert if you're on Windows. Constructor, select all of them, and then we need an empty constructor, which we can just type public user, just like that. And then we need getters and setters. So once again, Alt insert, select getter and setter, and then select all of the fields once more and press enter. And that's it. That's all we need for the user class. So we can close others and get back to this. Alright, having done that, we now need to work on our onStart method. So all the logic for what we're trying to achieve will be done in the onStart. We could do it in the onCreate, but remember, the onCreate method only runs when the activity is created for the first time. After that, it doesn't run again. And since we want this, we expect users might be added after we've created our activity. It's wise to use the onStart so that if we go to another activity and come back, we find any new users will have been added. Okay, so the next few steps are rather complicated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give us a little chart right up here at the top. Not a chart, a list that will tell us exactly what we're doing, just to keep everything lined up. So the first thing we're doing is creating a view holder class. Create a view holder class. I'll even number it. After that, we need to create a Firebase recycler adapter and all the code that is involved with that. And then finally, create methods in the view holder class to use in the adapter. So just 3 steps. But the reason I want to give us this list is because the code within each of these might get a little confusing. So let's start from the top, creating a view holder class. We can do that outside the way we just did, or we can do it within this very class. And I think that's the way I'd like to go. So public static, because we're inside another class, it has to be static. And I'll call it user holder. And it has to extend view holder. This one. Okay, it's giving errors because it wants the constructor, I'm sure. Yes, it wants the constructor, so we can just come to the left and get that light bulb. There it is, and hit create constructor. There, so that's already step 1 done. Create the user view holder class and give it its constructor so that error goes away. Within the class, we'll create a variable called view of the class view, and we will set it to be equal to this item view, which is within the constructor. So we'll say view is equal to item view. Okay. There's more code to be written for this class, but let's just leave it at just that. Very simple for now. Okay, that was step 1. Next, we create a Firebase recycler adapter, and we'll do this in the onStart. So we say Firebase recycler adapter for user and using the user holder that we just created, and we'll just name it adapter, keep things simple, is equals to new Firebase recycler adapter. And it gives us all this code. We have to terminate right here at the end. So you notice that there's an error over here. That's because it takes in some parameters. The constructor wants a few parameters. So I'm going to break this open so that it's a little neat. And the the parameters that it wants, first of all, is a model for the adapter. And which model will we use? Well, the one we just created. So that's user. And for this, we have to type .class. Next is the layout for the custom list. So that's r.layout.singleUser. The next thing is the view holder class, and that's user holder dot class. And finally, it needs a reference to the database that you're trying to get the data for. So we're going to say userdb, but we haven't created this yet, so let's make that. Database reference private. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Database reference userdb, and we'll initialize it in here. Userdb is equals to Firebase database get instance get reference, and then we have to say .child users, because it's the users that we're interested in. I'm going to move this code up so it's next to the context. I just feel it's a bit neater. Alright, that's done, and that error goes away. So that is all good. Now the next thing we have to do, let's check our list once more. Create methods in the view holder to use in the adapter. So let me explain this. Within what we just created, the Firebase Recycle adapter, we got this method, populate view holder. Now this is where we're actually going to take the data that has been given to us from the database and put it on our list. So for example, we're going to do, and we will use the user hold, the view holder that we created to do that. So and it's right there. So for example, we'll say view holder dot set name, set username, and then we'll take our user model, which is also passed in. So we'll say model dot get username, something like that. So of course this gives an error because we haven't followed the step, and the step was create the methods. So we have to do that. We have to create this method. So down here in our user holder class, we say public void set username, and we pass in that parameter string username, and then now we can create the text view. So we'll say text view name view is equals to view dot find view by id r.id.username. I think that's what I call it. No errors, it is what I call it. And then simply name view dot set text username. Very simple. Okay, that's it. With just this, I'm going to test it just to see what happens, see if there are any errors, anything that needs to be fixed. Alright, there it is. So we'll click this, go to users, and it didn't work. Nothing is showing up. And the reason is so silly. I just remember what I had forgotten. Okay, so far I believe our code is fine, but it makes no sense for me to create a Firebase adapter and not actually use it. Something I completely forgot, my bad. So let's go all the way to the top, back to our onCreate. We have our user list here. The next thing we have to do is say user list dot set has fixed size. We'll make that true, and then user list dot set layout manager new linear layout manager, and this takes context, so we'll give that context. And now just one line of code in our onStart. User list dot set adapter. That's it. Okay, apply these changes. I'm sure it'll be really quick. And there we are. So users, and it's worked. Or has it? It's giving me 1. Let's go to the database. And I have 3, so it's giving me William. I see what the problem is. So yes, it actually has worked, but check this out. So let's go back to the app. If you scroll down, you'll see the second one. There it is. And down further, the third one. Yep. So it's worked perfectly. Our code has done what we wanted to. Almost too perfectly, because in our layout, on our single user layout, this layout is taking up the entire screen, which is why on our app each entry is actually taking the entire screen. So to fix this is quite simple. You just have to click the relative layout in the tree, and instead of match parent we say wrap content, and it should shrink. There we go. So I'm going to apply this, but even as it's running, I guess we can end it there because everything has worked. So my small challenge to you will be to go and try and get the status to work. You've seen how I've done it with the username. It's quite simple. And if you can stretch it just a little bit, try and get the image view to show up. So try that, and you can, if it seems a bit hard, you can see the solution in the next video. Thank you very much.